Welcome, friends, to Exodus chapter 23, day 2. We have a continuation of some commands from Yahweh, who is giving his commands, his words to Moses, that Moses might pass them on to the people of Israel. And I hope that you, like me, are beginning to see God's heart behind these commands. It's beautiful. It's glorious. And today I've landed with, wow, God gets us. He sees us. He knows us. He gets us and understands our needs better than we understand ourselves. And we see him providing and teaching accordingly. So if we look at today begins with verse 10 of chapter 23, but I did go back to yesterday just to remember the context, the who, what, when, wow, how, why, and how kinds of questions. And we talked about this yesterday. We set these commands up in context that God has already said, look, I am taking you as my treasured possession. I want you to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, and you will be set apart. You will be holy. You will be set apart that others may know me, may know Yahweh, may know what kind of a God that I am. And so he's giving very clear instructions on what that looks like. Why? Because these people don't know. They've been living in Egypt for hundreds of years, and they have been slaves for decades. And most likely they have a slave-like mentality too. They need help, and God is having compassion. God extends his grace and provides exactly the help that he needs. So that's kind of the setup for today, just a continuation of yesterday. But let's look at these specific commands that he gives today. What do we see in the first couple of paragraphs? Well, we see his command for rest. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow. And then in verse 12 he says, look, 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest. And so we see a repeated word of rest. I put that in my keyword column. The first rest really does mean to leave fallow, to leave land uncultivated, to allow the soil to rest. And then the second rest, found in verse 12, is to rest from work, to be inactive, just all out refrain from working. And this goes right back to those 10 words that God gave, those 10 commandments. This goes back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 9. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. All right, so that's the first command. And then in verse 13, I highlighted this one. I thought this spoke to the main point of today's passage. Pay attention. Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. So definitely imperative verbs here. This is a command. Pay attention means to be attentive, to be focused on something, to be focused on what in this case, to be focused on me. Don't even mention these other gods that the nations around you have been serving, or these other gods from the land of which you have come, Egypt, where there were just thousands of gods. No, God is saying, pay attention to me. Focus on me and all that I have said to you. All right, there were some beautiful cross references here. I jotted down Deuteronomy 4:9. Only take care, the Lord says, and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, and lest you depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. All right, so here God is saying, look, pay attention. Stay focused on me. Remember me. Remember all that I have said to you. Remember all the things that you have witnessed that I have done on your behalf, and pass this on to your children. Here's a very practical way to remember the Lord and not forget him. So definitely key. I felt like the main point, pay attention to Yahweh and don't even mention these other gods. This rhythm of rest and the rhythm of the feast that he mentions in the rest of the passage, these will help you remember who I am and all that I have done. So isn't it interesting that God does go on to command these feasts 3 times a year? I felt like, wow, here's another practical way to stay focused on the Lord, to remember who he is and remember what he has done. And if we look at these 3 feasts, we see that they really, how do I want to say it? They really coincide with harvest time, with downtime, with remembering that it is the Lord who provides their rich harvest. It is the Lord who provides life. He has provided life. He has rescued them. They have salvation. They have been delivered from sin and death and slavery. And so God has given them life. But now here they are to remember how he continues to provide for them through their crops, through their food. And they are to have feasts to remember him. What's a feast, friend? A feast really is a banquet. It's a celebration. A feast, my Bible dictionary says this: to keep a day or period of time set aside for feasting and joyful celebration, sometimes involving pilgrimage. And we will see eventually that holds true for the people of Israel. So here is feasting, here's a banquet, here's a joyful celebration, remembering the Lord and remembering what it is that he has done. Isn't that beautiful? What an amazing way to remember the Lord. So friends, I think it is important, and this has really helped me as I have studied these commands, is to recognize what is it we learn about who man is. Like, what does God know about humankind that he would grant the people of Israel these commands, that he would gift them these commands? Well, if I walk back through and think about it, I see in verse 10, his command, verse 10 and 12, his command for rest, right? God knows that we have a tendency to overwork and overutilize our resources, doesn't he? And so he commands that we leave the land fallow once every on the 7th year. And he also, I think within this, he recognizes that we have a tendency to forget about the poor and their needs. And so built into this is a way to provide for the poor. Don't we see God's heart there for the poor? All right, verse 12, when he says, look, 6 days you shall do your work, and on the 7th day you shall rest. God gets us. He knows we have a tendency to overwork. He knows we will work 24/7 to gain something extra. We have a tendency to overwork and overwork our people. We have a tendency to ignore our need for rest and refreshment. And so God builds that in. And I think this speaks to both physical and spiritual refreshment. It's necessary. And so God works that in. He commands it into his people's rhythm of life. I think that's beautiful. God gets us. He gets us. All right, verse 13. 13. Pay attention to all that I have said and make no mention of the names of other gods. Friends, we have a tendency, this is no big surprise, we have a tendency to take our eyes off of God and to focus on other things. And I think in particular, this speaks to our tendency to not only take our eyes off of God, but to turn our eyes to other people and compare ourselves to other people and what they are doing. And in this case, the Israelites would have a tendency to look around at their neighbors and see how they are worshiping their gods. Or they might look back to Egypt and remember how the Egyptians worshiped their gods. So here is our human tendency to take our eyes off the Lord and then compare ourselves with how others are worshiping their little g gods. And so God provides in his grace very clear instructions. Hey, pay attention. Look at me, right? Pay attention. We already said to be attentive, to be focused on something, to be focused on who? To be focused on Yahweh. The Lord gets us. And then with these feasts, friends, I think I already mentioned as I walked through it, we need rhythms of life to celebrate the Lord, to remember his goodness to us and what it is that he has done. We need rhythms of life to remember how he continually provides for our needs. I love that. So friends, what is it we learn about who the Lord is? I landed with, wow, God gets us. He sees us. He knows us. He understands us better than we understand ourselves. And so he provides for us and teaches us. He gives clear instructions to meet these needs. Friends, he has our good in mind. He is a good, this is evidence that he is a good God who wants our good, right? He wants our good. He has our good in mind. Look at this. He wants us to rest. He wants us to be refreshed, both physically and spiritually. That's his heart. And this is when we are refreshed, when we are rested, we can better enjoy him. We can better stay focused on him. And that's another thing that I learned about who God is. He desires, friends, that we only have eyes and ears for him. Isn't that beautiful? He wants all of our heart. He wants all of our love. He wants us to only have eyes and ears for him and to listen to him and to his ways. And then with these feasts, I just see the Lord desires to celebrate with us. He wants to celebrate and enjoy life and enjoy these harvests with us. This is about relationship. This is about connecting with God. This is about enjoying one another. Look, he has given them life. He's given them life. He's rescued them. He's saved them from this land of slavery and death. And now he desires that his people would have abundant life, enjoy abundant life with him. Oh, friends, the application is just beautiful. I think remember him always, pay attention to him always, celebrate who he is and what it is he has done and what he continues to do. Oh, let us enjoy times of resting and times of feasting.